Hello and welcome to the U.S. Center. This event is accelerating transitions to resilient, just, and inclusive net zero economies globally. And now I'd like to welcome to the podium Trig Talley, Director of the Office of Global Change at the U.S. Department of State. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Good morning. First event of the day, at least for me. So thanks very much. I'm really delighted that you all have come to see this presentation for the Accelerating Transitions to Resilient, Just, and Inclusive Net Zero Economies Globally. This is hosted by the GCAP. And so I want to just talk a little bit about our experience with GCAP before I turn it over to Ron Benioff, who will moderate and who leads that effort. This is one of the first real climate initiatives that we did in the Obama administration. And at that time, it was called the Low Emission Development Strategies Global Partnership, and low emission development strategies were actually kind of new. They'd just shown up in the Copenhagen and Cancun outcomes. And we did one in the U.S., and we thought we could help others look strategically at what they would do. And we and Ron, who's endlessly creative and energetic, put together a team that developed 3 regional communities of practice in each of the major regions. And the whole idea was to get experts talking to each other about the solutions and challenges that they faced, and we at the State Department provided money for technical assistance as they came up with different challenges. So that model has proved to be extremely robust. This has been in place for now about 12 years. It actually lasted through the last administration. The Germans took it on and hosted the Secretariat. It was great. But just as importantly, we now have several thousand experts working across different parts of the energy economy, land use and agriculture, and even now some adaptation, right? Who get together regularly, who know what each other are doing, who can share solutions. So it's very much a peer-to-peer expert-run initiative. And I've had the opportunity to go to these communities of practice meetings that happen regionally. And they're very, very useful and robust. And I think it's fair to say that our experts who engage also learn an enormous amount at each of these sessions. So the model has been a very good one, and I really want to just give a lot of credit to the NREL team for putting together something that could work so well over time. It's a very exciting time for climate and for the kinds of things that GCAP can do and the services that it offers to its participants. We have what will probably be a very intensive 18 months or so from here as countries develop their NDCs and try to think about what their economies will look like past 2030. We also have an exciting set of things that have come out of this process that require as well a lot of technical focus. We have all the activities that relate to Article 6. It's very likely that at this meeting we will set some global goals in the energy and land use sectors, which will help countries and the private sector rally around renewable energy, energy efficiency, deforestation, and other things. And so we hope that this will continue to be a really robust partnership. I was just talking to Ron about the engagement. We have really regular engagement from several hundred experts around the world, and then thousands of others who dip in and out of the partnership. I know that we have some really great participants here who have been deeply involved in these processes, and I'll let Ron introduce them, but really appreciate our ability to engage with your countries, and just as important, with your experts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron and hope that we have an extremely enlightening and useful event here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Trig, and it's an honor to be here, and really hugely grateful to you, Trig, for your leadership over the years, not only investing in GCAP and seeing the value of this South-South peer-to-peer based learning and ambition raising and leadership that we all learn from, but you're being just a hero overall in the climate fight and all of the initiatives and programs and tireless work to create a better future for all of us. So thank you, and thank you to Angela Enriquez from the State Department, who leads the GCAP program, and thank you so much to the heart and soul of our efforts, the country officials and regional platforms that drive this effort. So I will say a few words about what GCAP is, and then we will turn to our panelists and really learning from the leaders in the different regions about the amazing work that they're doing. Let's see. This must be back there. Does somebody have control over the slides? Let's see. There we go. All right. Whoops. All right. So as Trig noted, what this Global Climate Action Partnership is all about, it's bringing together government officials, technical institutes, private sector leaders, nonprofits who are at the forefront of the climate fight to work on topic-specific communities of practice. And what we mean by this is bringing together, and I'll give some examples, leaders who are working on mini-grids or working on methane capture and reduction for livestock, who are working on leading sustainable transport solutions, to come together and benefit from three forms of collaboration. One is that we provide countries with early mover support to identify the pioneers who are at the forefront of managing high amounts of renewables on their grid, or electrifying transport, decarbonizing buildings, reducing emissions in agriculture and livestock, or working on finance initiatives. So that early mover support is critical so that those pioneers can go even farther and be a model for replication and inspired action by others. And we have several early mover pioneering leaders here with us today. The second is that we facilitate peer learning. We bring countries together to learn from each other. We support exchanges. We support training, so on a peer-to-peer basis. And the third is to offer expert advisory support and technical tools to all countries, to lift all countries up to follow the path that these pioneers are taking. So, whoops. We'll get there in a sec. All right, maybe we'll stop there. Great. So this is a little deeper presentation and information. Hopefully I'm not blocking too much of the screen here. So we have these robust platforms in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Imani Kumar, maybe you can raise your hand, Imani. Stand Up leads the Asia platform with ICLEI, based in Delhi, and coordinates engagement across all of these communities of practice in Asia. And South-South-North team leads the regional platform in Africa. Libalula, based in Peru, leads the regional platform in Latin America and the Caribbean. For each platform, we have country government officials together with leading international institutions in the region who sit on a steering committee and set priorities, identify what are the common interests of countries in the region for advancing action and for peer learning and accelerating change. Chioma, who I'll introduce in a minute, from Nigeria, is the leader, for example, of the Africa Steering Committee. And those steering committees then identify a set of communities of practice that bring these practitioners together, the experts, government, non-government, who are working on the challenging solutions to collaborate on action. So just a few examples. So in Africa, for example, we have multiple communities, including on mini-grids, on livestock, on soil carbon management, and other topics. The livestock community, looking at emission reductions, recently had a whole series of workshops to educate countries not only in emission inventories but mitigation solutions, and organized a peer exchange between Zimbabwe, Kenya, Malawi to learn about best practices with livestock emission management and to lift each other's efforts up in a significant way. Also worked a soil carbon management workshop that led to an enhanced plan for Nigeria for managing soil carbon and improving agricultural productivity. An example in Asia, we have multiple communities of practice. One community that's been very active, for example, is on sustainable transport, and there's formed a leadership group of 10 countries who are at the forefront of electrifying transport, and with technical assistance supporting a couple pioneering countries, Philippines, Vietnam, for example, to work on enhanced EV standards, to look at standards for battery production and safety and second life use of batteries, and then organizing training and technical assistance across all 10 countries. In Latin America, also a robust set of communities of practice on transport, on bioenergy, on renewable energy, a new community on methane, public-private partnerships. One of the more exciting efforts in Latin America, the Latin American leaders created something called the Renewable Energy in Latin America and the Caribbean Initiative, where they challenged each other to set an ambitious goal for all countries to get to at least 70% renewable energy by 2030, and to provide technical assistance and training and peer collaboration on that goal. This effort is now managed by the Inter-American Development Bank, and we're doing a whole series of technical support to countries. There's 16 countries who have now signed on to this goal, and they're about to raise the goal. They're making so much progress, they're ready to raise the goal and do even more. We're providing technical assistance on renewable energy planning and on storage deployment, on optimizing tools for use of storage, for stationary grid applications, and best practices with standards testing and certification on those storage technologies, and valuing the ancillary services that storage provides on the grid. So very exciting work, and happy to identify opportunities for further engagement. And now we'll really turn to the experts. So I'm pleased to invite to the stage Michael, sorry, I need to take my glasses off to read this clearly. Michael Sina-Cruz, who is the Director for Energy Policy and Planning in the Department of Energy in the Philippines, and has been a true leader in the energy transition in the Philippines, and we're really thrilled to be working with him. Michael, if you can join me up here, and I'll introduce you one at a time. Secondly, we're thrilled to have with us Muda Chioma Felicitas Eda, who Chioma is a leading expert in the Nigerian Ministry of Environment, Department of Desertification, Land Degradation, and Drought Management, and has deep expertise on these topics, working over 15 years, and as I noted, is our chair of our African Climate Action Partnership. Chioma, and a good friend and an amazing colleague. Finally, I'd like to introduce Marlon Apanada. Marlon is the Southeast Asia Engagement Lead for Energy and Climate at World Resources Institute, and he brings 15 years of experience working on renewable energy project development, corporate procurement, advising companies around the region and financing of projects. And Marlon serves as the co-chair of our finance working group that's working across countries on the big challenges of investment mobilization. So, Michael, I'll start with you, and thank you again for being here. So the Philippines is a key leader in the climate fight, and a country that we're all inspired by and learning from, and really at the forefront of the energy transition. I wondered if you could elaborate a little on how the government of Philippines has elaborated your NDC goals into actions, and what are some of the lessons you've learned, and how are you working with GCAP on your efforts? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. For the Philippines, for us to be able to achieve our NDC or our energy transition, so we have put in place the necessary policies. We have several policies on RE, efficiency, biofuels, microgrid, as well as on electric vehicle. So all of these are designed for us to meet our goal or to energy transition, and ultimately to have a commitment on net zero. Actually, it's only the Philippines that has not committed yet on net zero among the ASEAN, because what we our intention is to overachieve our targets, not necessarily to commit something that we are not, because it depends on the technological development. So we're waiting for the emerging technologies to be available, like for instance the hydrogen and ammonia, and we can tap this fuels to co-fire or to be part of our mix. So the importance of the GCAP, specifically the ALP, the Asia-led partnership, is that although we have these policies, we need to constantly review these policies to be able for us to determine what are the gaps. And some of the projects under this Asia-led, one of which is to review the policies on electric vehicle as well as on energy efficiency. We also have, we requested ALP to look at the policy, or to formulate, or to help us to formulate a policy framework on the green hydrogen. And we also would like to thank the Asia-led because because they are helping us on the hybridization of our off-grid areas. Because the off-grid areas in the Philippines are heavily dependent on oil-based plants, and it is it's a standing the Secretary of Energy gave a directive for us to hybridize initially those off-grid areas to be able to reduce dependency on oil, and eventually we could have 100% clean energy sources for the off-grid areas. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and yeah, we're really, it's an honor to kind of work together with you and work on these shared challenges that we all face. And I think you highlighted this key point of the need for learning about best practices with policy reform, and it's clearly an iterative process. And I think so the ability to work together on subsequent refinements and improvements of policies and lessons learned and learning from policy failures as well as successes is absolutely critical, and that's a big part of the work of the platform. So Chioma, you have been one of the leaders in Nigeria and in Africa and really globally at challenging countries and working in Nigeria on developing long-term strategies and figuring out how to integrate a vision for long-term low-carbon sustainable development into NDCs and into near-term action. And I wondered if you could reflect a little on how you're tackling that challenging issue in Nigeria, and what are some of the policies and measures that Nigeria is implementing to support that long-term vision, and some of the learning that's happening through the Africa Climate Partnership in that regard.
Thank you very much, Ron, for having me today. This local girl from a village in Nigeria is looking for an opportunity to add to the global solution to what faces all of us. So this time is not for spoken words. This time is for action. And we are passionate about taking this action. I have been very privileged to be on the decks of the NDCs and the LTS for Nigeria government. And we have been excited doing this particular Paris Agreement, because it is for us a bottom-top approach, which gives every country the privilege to communicate what you can do personally, not subjected to what the global community wants you to do. With this flexibility, Nigeria developed what they call the long-term vision in 2021, and we submitted it in Glasgow. That told the part of what Nigeria is expected to do for long-term vision. Knowing fully well that we submitted also the same year an updated NDC, which was very ambitious, that committed Nigeria to reducing emission by 20% unconditionally and 47% conditional. So we found it very inefficient, looking at the short-term issue, and the LTS is the long-term issue. So what we did in advancing Nigeria's long-term development strategy, first and foremost, is to map existing policies. And we choose wisely, because the NDC we updated focused on 7 sectors. So what we chose to do was to align the sectors with the LTS sectors. So the first thing we did was to map existing policy documents from all the 7 sectors. The institution responsible for these 7 sectors, we need to understand their directions, their policy issues. How do the government create more enabling environment for them to advance actions to meet up with the NDC and also the LTS led? As soon as those policies were mapped, we started aligning the targets with what the institutions are doing. After the alignment, we did capacity building for the responsible officers to intimate them, inform them on what the government policies will be. So after that capacity building, what we did was we mapped out data, relevant data that will feed into the scenarios for the LTS led. After the mapping of the relevant data, we also mapped out relevant technologies that will be speaking to the scenarios from vis-a-vis the responsible sectors. Then what we did again is to do public awareness and outreach. We need to intimate the general public on what the government policies were to be. And they understood from inception that this is where the government is trying to look at. So after that, we also did domestic mapping of costing. What is it for Nigeria? What do we need to contribute for Nigeria to meet this very important target? So what we now did again was to intimate the policymakers and the parliamentarians. This is what we are committed to do. And being that you are the head, the decision makers, you need to also understand what the direction of the government policy would be. So they were the same page, then we started drafting the scenarios. We focused on 4 scenarios. And those 4 scenarios were very keen. We look at the business as usual scenario. We look at the current policy scenarios. Then we also looked at the gas scenarios. Then finally, we look at the renewable energy, which is the most ambitious one, scenarios. Those 4 scenarios inform the long-term low-emission development strategies. We did not forsake adaptation. We integrated issues of adaptation. Then we considered other co-benefits, like just transition. We did green job assessment, and we also do gender mainstreaming. So these are what inform Nigeria long-term low-emission development strategies. And I'm happy to say that we have launched this document here at COP on the first day, that's 1st of December. We launched it with in African Union Pavilion, where we also collaborated with other donors and also with ministers, and also the president gave its approval for the launching. He was unfortunately absent because there were high-level meetings that needed his attention, but the aim was for him to launch the long term. So we're in, and we are very, very optimistic in achieving whatever that we have put in that document, and we look forward to doing it. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you so much, Chioma. I think we're all learning an incredible amount from the leadership that Nigeria is showing in terms of the way that you have linked this NDC vision and pathways with the LTS vision and pathways with the NDC plans and strategies. And I think this approach of developing detailed scenarios that combine the long-term vision and near-term action, and very importantly, the work that you're doing on the just transition. and the gender and equity issues and the economic development approach for all segments of the population is so critical. Thank you for all that you're doing and for sharing Nigeria's leadership with all of our countries. So Marlon, I wanted to ask you, you're leading a lot of the work in GCAP in the finance working group and working across multiple countries in all the regions. And wanted to ask if you could share some of the lessons, some of the effective actions that you have found have most helped countries in mobilizing investment.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for the U.S. Senator for giving us space to share our thoughts in today's panel. The Finance Working Group is a unique thematic area in the ecosystem that GCAP and the LEDS Global Partnership has built, because it's the foundational red line that cuts across the other thematic areas, whether it's energy, whether it's transport, whether it's agriculture, forest, ocean, and land use. Over the past years, we have been responding to stakeholders such as private sector, public sector, communities of practice, and the experts that we have onboarded. And the main lesson learned that we have identified are about threefold. First, finance are of different colors, and then they have different places in the capital stack. When we talk about NCDs and LTS, they are mostly pre-commercial. They need a lot of catalytic support, whether they're coming from philanthropic or donor or public finance. But we've also seen different opportunities, especially in energy and transport, where you can mobilize already the commercial capital, commercial finance, or have them blend so that commercial and donor capital can be mobilized in blended finance. So across those four stacks of commercial, blended, donor, or public and philanthropic, there are different opportunities that need to be matched with the different finance vehicles. And that means we have to really leverage on the on-the-ground communities on what makes sense. And this is where GCAP is very helpful, because it's really a platform for convening leaders on the ground. Over the past several years, there has been none like GCAP that cuts across different stakeholders like that. Secondly, we have seen that green finance, there's different and varying appreciation and understanding on what green finance is and what blended finance is. And that means a platform like GCAP is a way for us to put our minds together and have a sense of whatever can be considered as consensus. So there, around 2017, or 6 years ago, when I started joining and supporting the Finance Working Group, there has been several definitions on what green finance is, whether it's financing green or greening the finance system. And now we have talked about specific thematic areas to support in order to green the finance system, for policies to be supportive, and to green specific finance, to finance specific green projects. And the third lesson is about the evolution of understanding on what finance instruments can be mobilized. We started around green finance and green bonds around 6 years ago. Then we talked about blended finance and how we could work together with multilateral development banks, donor communities, philanthropic capital, and then blend it with commercial capital. And then as we have scoped over this year and preparing for our work plan next year, the main interest, at least across Africa and in Asia, is how will this carbon finance roll out? So we are investing our time and energy over the next years thinking about this and how will this unfold. So just having these 3 points of lessons learned is crucial, because finance will be the foundational red line that cuts across these thematic areas. And we are privileged to have GCAP really support us to carry out our work, not just in Africa, not just in Asia, but also in Latin America. Thank you.
No, thank you, Marlon. And yeah, we really appreciate the work that you're doing together with your co-chair, Joanne Manda, with UNDP, to work with countries on probably the most central challenge here. At the end of the day, if we're not collectively successful at mobilizing investment at the scale needed, the clean energy, the transport, the ag transitions will not happen, and we will not succeed. And so it's so important to help promote better education, better understanding on the finance mechanisms, and to work on solutions to de-risk markets that really lead to the scale of capital that's necessary. So I wanted to ask each of the panelists one question, and then I'll open it up to see if there's questions in the audience. I wanted to ask if you could each reflect on, maybe share one example where you've seen peer-to-peer collaboration across countries really work well, and a topic that you think you would like to see even more peer learning and exchange. And I'm going to go in reverse order. We'll start with you, Marlon. So it didn't give you much opportunity to think.
All right. Thanks so much, Ron. One of the great topics that we were able to see peer-to-peer learning, regional cross-learning, was on the topic of green bonds when it was still emergent in 2019 to 2021. Especially in Southeast Asia, where the cost of capital, because of perceived risks, is higher. And that was when we had a consensus of understanding that in order to mobilize the finance needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, we need a whole-of-system approach in what we can mobilize. And that's when green bonds emerged as a topic of interest. We learned a lot from cases and examples in Europe and in the US, bringing those topics together and really having a very nuanced and targeted understanding on the role of public players, corporate players, and local governments, and the limitations of such in order to mobilize and be able to leverage on an instrument like green bonds. I believe that was very fruitful, and that also allowed us to humble ourselves as well on what opportunities can be matched with specific instruments. So on the second question around what would be great topics of collaborative learning and peer-to-peer exchange, I noticed that during the first few days of COP28, there has been a declaration around food, right? And it is something that we need to invest time and energy with in terms of financing nexus topics. The energy transition will need to happen, but then that will provide a systemic risk to agriculture and food later on, as agricultural lands become industrialized in order to host the tripling of gigawatts that's needed for the renewable energy ambition. That will present a different way of looking at opportunities when they are nexus topics around energy and food. So we are currently investigating and learning from NREL actually on the topic of agrivoltaics, agriculture and photovoltaics together at scale in order for countries to achieve their energy transition goals while also preserving food productivity and increasing farmer incomes. As a finance working group co-chair, I look at these two topics as a combination of two risk profiles. So when you talk about opportunities, we're also talking about risks. So we have to talk to the finance working group, to our community of bankers, multilateral development practitioners, and on-the-ground experts on how to look at these nexus issues and topics, not as doubling of risks, but a mitigation of risks. And that will be one of the big areas for collaboration moving forward, topics on energy transition nexus topics.
Excellent. No, that's a really key point, and absolutely agree that these nexus issues, the energy, food, water integration, we need to come up with solutions that lead to maximal and optimal use of those resources. And your agri-photovoltaics example is perfect because that actually has benefits both for renewable energy production and for agricultural production. So, Chioma, the same question to you, a good example and an area of further focus.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron, for this very interesting question. I'm super excited to share my experience. The AfriCup has exposed us to a lot of community of practices. We have so many community of practices where we have benefited to peer-to-peer learning experiences. But the one that topped the most for me, which was most recent, was the one that was held during the Climate Week at Nairobi, Kenya. So we did a peer-to-peer learning on the issues of the long-term low-emission development strategies. You know, the global community has asked us to communicate on NDCs, which we did. And looking at with the goals, the NDCs are insufficient. So they are now encouraging African and every other person to communicate the long-term low-emission development strategies. So most countries has actually kick-started activities on how to formulate their LTS leads. So this training was very timely, very important. We also gathered all the countries in the African continent to discuss what are the possible challenges of formulating an LTS, what are the advantages, and also what are the bottleneck that you might encounter. So that gave everybody the privilege to share experiences. Then was when we were finalizing the Nigeria's long-term low-emission development strategies. And what I learned from there informed the final copy of the LTS lead, and also informed the socialization that we did. We validated it when I came back and also integrated the lessons I learned from that engagement. We validated the LTS led with parliamentarians, the subnational governments, the federal level, the CSOs, the NGOs, and also the international partners that we are engaging with in Nigeria. So everybody made an input, and that gave us a whole societal acceptable document that was launched. That is the experience that topped the most for me. And from that engagement that we had at Nairobi, there was a discussion or a presentation on soil health. That comes to my second question, the answer to the second question. And I want to align my own thoughts with the previous speaker, what he said. It's not different. Soil health is an untapped area. And soil health is instrumental not only achieving the sectoral, agricultural sector target of the NDC and the LTS led. Soil health is instrumental to food security. And coming from the most populous nation in Africa, Nigeria, the very first, we have a new administration. The president declared emergency on food security. The state of emergency was declared on food sector. So when I got that exposure from the lessons we learned from soil health, I wrote to the Africa when I go home. I said, this cannot only be beneficial to me. I need a regional meeting to happen in Nigeria. And I don't know how people are going to do it, but please. She was there in the conversation, and they brought that regional meeting to Abuja. So going forward, one of the sectors that emits the most in Nigeria is energy sector, followed by the agricultural sector. If we are doing intervention in these two sectors, we are going to meet all the global objectives about emission reduction. I want to see more engagement in the issues of agriculture through the soil health that also promotes food security for the poverty-centered people of Africa. So this is the sector that we have whole societal buy-in, because it has a very well seen and identified co-benefits. It's putting food on the tables of many persons, and it's also creating green jobs. So this is where I want GCAP to advance engagement going forward. And thank you, Ron.
No, thank you, Chioma. We really are keen to scale up our work, so we're all in and kind of working together with you on this critical issue of soil health and soil carbon management that is essential for agricultural productivity and for our shared climate, and continuing this in a regional way, kind of across countries. So over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Ron. For the Philippines, we learned a lot from the European countries with regard to offshore wind. because right now our focus is on how to develop our offshore wind resource potential. And through our engagement with some EU countries, we were able, or our president was able to issue an executive order calling for a whole-of-government approach in the development of offshore wind. And because of this, we were able to issue right now 80 service contracts with a capacity of around, potential capacity of around 60 to 70 gigawatt. And because of this, we set a aspirational target for the current, or we are updating the Philippine Energy Plan right now, and we set a higher penetration for offshore wind. And we want to ensure that the support facilities will be there once these service contracts will be realized, specifically on the transmission. And we are looking at whether the government can finance such the transmission networks, even the development of ports. Aside from this, we also learn from ASEAN countries like Indonesia right now now has on hydrogen production, because we see that hydrogen will also be a good option for us to be able for us to increase the share of clean energy. On the next topic or that we need to focus more on is on the just transition, specifically on workforce development. Because we are not just looking at increasing the share of energy sources, but looking at what would be the impact of this to those working with the coal power plants, those working with the mining, and we need, currently we are mapping, we do have a plan right now on green jobs. So under these green jobs, we need to identify what are the skills that we need to develop for our workforce to be able for them to shift from being engaged in fossil fuel production on mining and working on coal power plants. Aside from our workforce, we need also to look at the communities hosting this coal mines, the coal power plants. What will happen to them once we shift or once we close down all these coal mines and coal power plants? So that is our focus right now on energy transition. And specifically, we want to get support on the international accreditation with regard to green jobs. So meaning the expertise or the workforce from the Philippines can be recognized to other countries once they want to work in other countries on offshore wind and other clean energy sources projects. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Michael. And yeah, great examples of learning on offshore wind and on grid modernization, but really key point that you highlighted. None of us will succeed with our energy transition unless we focus on those that potentially are left behind, the communities that are losing jobs from the transition away from fossil fuel. We're doing a lot of work in U.S. communities, obviously big issue there, and increasingly around the world. In fact, we just put together a report, happy to share with you and others, looking at best practices with economic revitalization for communities in the U.S. and Chile that are phasing out coal, but really critical area. So we have a few minutes. If there's any questions that folks here in the audience would like to ask any of the panelists. Okay. Or, one question here.
Thank you very much. My name is Keshav from Asia Rich Partnership. So just a quick question. As we know, on energy transition front, the main challenge is data aggregation, the collection from the different departments to understand what is the baseline, what is our target year. So if I can quickly learn from you, what are the steps that you are taking in your respective countries to consolidate and have an integrated database management system to lead and accelerate the transition for a resilient and just energy future? Thank you.
An easy question on data acquisition and data management for the transition.
Okay. For the Philippines, we have established, created a working group on this. We also looking at, we are, the Department of Energy is the one handling the data, specific to the energy sector, on emission inventory, among others. But this is a whole of government approach, so therefore we collaborate closely with, not only with our attached agencies, also with our other government agencies. Specifically, when we talk of the just transition, we are working with our Department of Labor. We are also looking. We are also working with our Department of Education, the higher education, among others, for us to have a holistic program on the just transition, the upskilling, reskilling of our workers.
One, the National Bureau of Statistics in my country are responsible for issues of data. But what we did was to make sure that we mainstreamed what we need in their templates of communication to different sectors. Second to that, we established what we call the institutional framework for MRV system. And we did the sectoral MRV system and also did the subsectoral MRV system. We identified individuals who are responsible for all the subsectors, and we owe to them to collate while we archive those data. So it has been a very straightforward engagement. It's not seamless. It has its own challenges. But what we did was that we were relying on MOU, which is a very weak institutional issue. So what we are trying to do now with the parliamentarians is to develop an act that mandates all sectors to communicate, maybe biannually, which is so far, but quarterly is more efficient, to the respective institutions that uses this data. But believe you me, it's a huge challenge in developing country like Nigeria. But what we are doing is that we have identified it as a challenge. Then we're looking for the most easiest and sustainable solution towards it. And this is what we have deployed. Very good question. Thank you.
Marlon, yeah, 1 minute.
Right. So the question really is around institutional alignment and the ability of the different ministries to talk to each other, right? We've seen that in the case of Vietnam, where the climate conversation is housed under MONRE, which is a natural resources office. But the big part of the just transition and the decarbonization goals of the country will rest with MOIT, which is the Ministry of Industry and Trade, talking to the Prime Minister's office. And this is also consistent with many of the ASEAN countries that we have engaged with. And that will continue to be a challenge, the seamlessness, simplification of it, because this is truly a whole of government issue, a whole of government system. GCAP will be there to support these kinds of conversations as a convening of leaders and experts. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you, for the outstanding remarks that you offered, the leadership and the learning that you're investing in, and really the journey we're on together. So a couple things I wanted to note as we wrap up here. One is that we're really excited through GCAP to be expanding something called the Climate Action Accelerator. So this is a help desk service that is available to governments and those working with governments on low emission strategies in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and the Caribbean, Asia, and Pacific, I should say. So if you're in that region or working with colleagues in those regions and see an opportunity to work to access expertise across the partnership, which is not just NREL, but experts like Marlon, the experts Chioma and Michael and colleagues around the world, working on policies, working on programs, working on finance initiatives on low emission development. Please take advantage of that accelerator. And I want to thank you and the audience and the panelists. We heard about the importance of policy. We heard about the importance of integrating long-term strategies with NDCs, about finance initiatives and mobilizing finance, and about the critical need for investment in workforce development and just transitions across all sectors in a nexus way. So really a lot of work to do, but luckily we're all in it together and collaborating both regionally and globally. So thank you again for your remarks and your leadership, and thank you all for joining us.
Let's keep the applause going for a wonderful panel.